Hey folks, thanks for tuning in. Welcome to Third Person. Now, just like most of you out there, majority of the media I've consumed mainly featured Caucasian males as the heroes. So, logically, most of my creations in my earlier artistic career were Caucasians. Pondering this made me question the validity of the concept of the individual. And I've come to the harrowing conclusion that I am not as sophisticated or as complicated as I believe I am. And I'm sure the same applies to you. The same goes for drawing women. When I set out to draw or produce a character for a story, portraying that character as a female was never my first inclination. For a long time, all my heroes or protagonists were Caucasian males. Now, personally, as in the daily function of my mind, I never truly consider the importance of representation in media or the ramifications of the lack of it. But thankfully, the late, great Dwayne McDuffie did. He did think about this a lot, which is why he created Static Shock. Dwayne Glenn McDuffie. He was with us up until February 21st, 2011. For those of you who do not know, he was an American writer of comic books and television, known for producing and writing the animated series Static Shock, Justice League Unlimited, which is amazing, one of the greatest, slightly underrated. I think quite a few people know about it, but I think not enough. It doesn't get enough praise. Justice League Unlimited is amazing. And Ben 10. I love Ben 10. The first Ben 10, not and Ultimate Alien is great, but the very first Ben 10 series is really really great stuff. And he also co-founded the pioneering minority-owned and operated comic book company Milestone Media, which focused on underrepresented minorities in American comic books. He also earned three Eisner Award nominations for his work in comic books. So this guy, there's a reason why he is so respected. So thank you, Dwayne. You will be missed. Now, during a conversation with one of my friends on Discord, called on a Discord server called YouTube Artists, which I highly recommend you check out and join because it's a really great space for artists with a YouTube channel during trying to get out there and trying to connect, and it's generally a friendly space. So I highly recommend you come visit us. I'll be there. So during a conversation with my boy Z Dog, who started this server, I suggested he draw Static Shock for a jacket he's designing. But the suggestion and our conversation made me realize that I've never drawn Static Shock. So that conversation and me drawing Static Shock here really got me thinking about how much I regurgitate what I consume. It's not a particularly great revelation, but on a personal level, I realize that I have to give my creations more consideration because representation in media is important. You just appreciate how important it is because it's something that's, it's right in front of you, but you don't think about it consciously. It just slips in underneath the surface. We're all just sort of subconsciously programmed. I can imagine an alternative reality where, for the sake of argument, popular media mainly featured black women. And in that reality, everything I would produce, unless I consciously tried to do otherwise, would feature black female heroines. Now that's fodder for an interesting sci-fi movie or comic book. Speaking of which, Ava Everywhere, the comic book I'm currently working on, will be out at the end of the month, so please stay tuned for that. Doing this Static Shock fan piece gives me a break from drawing a whole bunch of panels whenever I can when I get home from my terrible, terrible job. Anyway, now, representation in media and my newfound perspective on individuality, or the lack of it, directly ties into this Static Shock piece I'm doing. Because, as you can see, I used a pre existing model and pose as the basis for my illustration. The original work is of Electro, the Spider Man villain, by an artist that goes by Allure4711, who has a profile a profile on wallhere.com, a wallpaper art website. So I scoured the web for an interesting pose that was indicative of how I wanted to see Static Shock portrayed, and settled on this one. So for a long time, I believed everything I produce should come from me, from scratch, from start to finish. I felt that using a reference was for hacks, but now I know that this is detrimental to the growth of an artist, because whether we know it or not, our works aren't wholly original, because nothing is. There is nothing new under the sun. Now, letting go of that delusion, that bias, I'm free to produce better work, more professional creation, works that can stand alongside the greats, because that's how the greats do it. They use reference, and a lot of it. And now that this is on display, right before your very eyes, I love how the piece turned out. It's solid work, has artistic expression, and it's how I see or would like to see Static Shock portrayed. Because all cards on the table, to be completely honest, I was never a big fan of Static Shock. I watched the cartoons, it was great, but I was never deeply into it, and I don't think I've ever read a Static Shock comic book. And furthermore, I'm not that big a fan of his costume. I don't think trench coats or, I don't think trench coats work for an electric powered superhero. But I like how this turned out because I used the flailing tails of the coat to further emphasize the power and force of the electricity. And I particularly enjoy using his dreadlocks to enhance the intensity of the current. Now, I wouldn't have come up with this all by myself, or it would have taken me a while to find this kind of pose and expression for him, all, you know, on my own volition. So I embraced my non individuality and took the pressure off creating an original pose off of myself. And I stopped being so precious about my creation. Because more often than not, as I've explained, what we create doesn't come from us. Now, folks, this design is available at my store. It looks great on t shirts and would make a perfect gift for a Static Shock fan. The links to my store are down below, as well as to my Patreon, on which I have exclusive content just for the kind souls who decide to support this artist with dreams of becoming financially independent through his art. I have another video coming out this Sunday, so please tune in for that. For those of you out there who like my work, there are great things coming. I'm currently working on a couple cartoon series ideas, doing a lot of concept art and writing a lot. The series will be ongoing on this channel. It's either going to be based off of the SCP Foundation lore. For those of you out there who might not know this, it's SCP, I believe it stands for Secure, Contain, Protect. It's completely fan created. There's just people out there who just come up with different monsters that fit into the SCP regulation database, right? There's an SCP wiki. It's full of monsters and lore. So the series will follow. The working title is SCP Strike Force, which is it follows a bunch of agents like the characters from the TV show Fringe or X Files. They just go out, investigate weirdness, and by the end of the show, they contain a weird anomaly. So it's either going to be that or an idea that I've been cooking for a while, which is Tenno, the space ninjas from the Warframe world versus the Jedi, from Star Wars. And just kind of creating like a DC meets Mortal Kombat kind of situation. I think that would make for great action. I'm undecided, but I am developing both ideas right now, so stay tuned to see what happens. So that's all for this video. Thank you for tuning in. Once again, please check out my Patreon, like, subscribe. This will help me grow. I know there aren't a lot of you right now, but I appreciate every one of you. All the comments, the few comments. These are the early days, the precious days, the days when you guys can say, yeah, I was there when he wasn't anything. No one knew who he was. But thank you, and yeah, stay safe out there. Wear your masks, and the media is crazy right now. You just turn on the news, and all you hear is the virus is escalating and people dying everywhere. So this is a good time to appreciate the precious nature of life and appreciate the little things, even the bad things. Like the older you get, even the bad memories tend to take on a lighter note. So this is a good time to appreciate what we have and appreciate things like representation in media and how important that is.